All right, we are live. Let's do this guy.
They're not managers. They're not scouts. They've spent exactly 0 hours in a baseball front office. Welcome to From the Peanut Gallery, where above average fans give you below average takes on America's pastime and other stuff too.
And welcome back to another episode of From the Peanut Gallery. And we've got two pinch hitters in the Peanut Gallery. First, we got Brian Arbor. You've read his Substack. You've seen him on Go Astros. And Brian's pinch hitting for Emily Nyman because you're both New Yorkers. I feel like
Absolutely.
There you go. And Jess Canaster, who's, I guess, been to Ohio, is now pitch hitting for Ed Rivera, who lived in Ohio and now lives in I've lost the connection, Jess.
I was going to go with single syllable first names.
Ah, damn. You see, Jess, this is why are you? You know, Jess, one of the things we have to get to at the end of this episode, because we're not going to have the same traditional holiday episode, we have to figure out our Jewish Hanukkah sports take. So both of you guys who are connected to the Jewish faith, be thinking about that in the back of your head for another 30 minutes. But, you know, Brian, I don't want to dive too much into Astro stuff, but at least our GM is not unhinged. What were some of your thoughts about the whole he's just going to get hurt? I mean, yes, he's true, but what were some of the first thoughts when you read that whole thing?
I mean, part of the job of being a general manager is, you know, they often make bland statements to the media, and that's a good reason why, right? Because Giancarlo Stanton, and notably Yamamoto, the Japanese free agent pitcher, who is going to be one of the stars of the free agent market year, guy who's, you know, agent to lots of players, you know, took that. I mean, he could have taken that worse, right? But, you know, Cashman had to not enjoy reading those comments, I'm sure. Yankee fans had to not enjoy reading those comments.
Yeah, Jesse basically said the quiet part out loud. Like, yes, that's in the metrics. And yes, I'm sure like when arbitration happens, those things get brought up. But he kind of said the quiet part out loud.
It almost sort of feels like a bit of purposeful tampering. You know, you're gonna tell a guy who, you know, still under contract. You're gonna tell a guy who you want to be a big part of your team, thinks he's a big part of the organization, that this is who he is and this is how he plays. And maybe he is not going to want to be there anymore. And maybe it's an opportunity to clear some salary, putting on the tinfoil hat a bit, clear some salary so that they can go for Ohtani, Yamamoto. Why not throw in Cody Bellinger just for good measure?
You know, it's funny though, because there's a meme going around and it was like Yankee fan, Giancarlo Stanton's injury prone, Cashman, Giancarlo Stanton's injury prone, Yankee fan. How dare you? Like, I mean, it really is. I guess because there's been a lot coming out of that front office. It does feel like, Brian, I know we've talked about this a bunch on our show, but it does feel like things aren't vibing very well. I mean, I'm even going back to what we learned in the Reggie documentary about why Reggie Jackson didn't take the job there. It does seem like, for it being, you know, one of the most valuable franchises in all of sports, it's not ran very functionally right now.
Yeah, it's also unusual in the sense that, right, Cashman's been the general manager since 1996.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's the longest tenured guy, and you know, it's odd because the Yankee, right, in our childhood, Jess, I'll tell you a story from our childhood. George Steinbrenner ran the Yankees in this mercurial fashion of firing both his, you know, manager and general manager every other year and keep going back to Billy Martin. And, you know, and in the 90s, they figured out, you know, get some calm, rational people who know what they're doing and stick with them and develop some really good players. That works. It's almost like they've overlearned that lesson.
Well, and to kind of build on that, they learned the lesson of, you know, building the championships from the core four that won them those titles, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. And then they got beat by the Marlins and everything just went haywire. And they thought that they could buy a World Series. And I thought that they had maybe unlearned, or I guess relearned the development lesson, because they started, it seems like they're on their way back towards that. They have some guys that have come through AA. They're working through AAA now. Jason Dominguez and Anthony Volpe, guys who could be new core 4 type players. And it just seems like maybe they're going to grow tired of it because it's New York and they haven't won a title in 20 years. And so it's the end of the world, and they're just going to throw $700 million at everybody.
Well, but they haven't done that. I mean, so this is also the story of the 2017 Yankees, where they not only had Judge, who's been everything that 27 promised he'd be when he's healthy, but they also had guys like Gleyber Torres and Gary Sanchez and Luis Severino. They had a lot of really good young players, and for a variety of reasons, they did not become good middle-aged players.
Yeah.
Judge being the notable exception. And now they're on sort of a different, they didn't get a 2017 performance from guys like Volpe, who was fine, and you project him to be pretty well, but guys like Peraza, Jason Dominguez looked promising, but then got hurt. So he's out for most of this season. They put a lot of faith in their prospects in 2023, and their prospects didn't launch. And that raises the question of what's this team going to be like in 2024? Is it going to be, Aaron Judge and 8 guys? Or is it going to be, something else? And then the other thing, today, Garrett Cole won the Cy Young. And he is the story.
Garrett, too, by the way, because, obviously one of the best pitchers of his generation. So good for him.
Yeah, and he's finished second, I think, 3 times. It's almost surprising.
Twice Justin Verlander. So
yeah. But it's the Yankees doing what I think the Yankees can and should do, which is we have a hole in our team. We don't have an ace pitcher. We can outbid everyone for one. They're effective in doing that. They're, and if they can pair that with development, that's what those late 90s teams were about.
One of our good friends on Twitter, Jeremy Kaufman, he had a funny tweet today, or X, whatever we're calling it, where he was talking about how it's the off season where everybody worries about their favorite billionaires running out of money. But, there has been this sort of idea or this rumor or this thought process that, teams just buy a World Series. But one could argue the Rangers is the first World Series that's been bought in a long time. Do you guys think that that's going to really, is that going to steer into the skid? And in really looking at our 2 teams, the Astros and the Giants, I think the Giants are going to be in on Ohtani, and I feel like missing on Judge and Correa might be the reason why they're we cannot lose 3 times in a row. So do you guys feel like that's going to be a sort of step in the direction for more teams? And how does that apply to our teams?
I think back-to-back years, and I mean, maybe it's because of what I've grown up watching from a managerial perspective in San Francisco, that in 38 years of life, I think the Giants, I've seen the Giants have 5 or 6 managers, and that's it. And it's because they've had a lot of longevity, but they've had a lot of old school kind of guys. Roger Craig was that in the 90s. Mm-hmm. He was only there for a couple of years, but Felipe Alou was the same way. Dusty Baker, Bruce Bochy, Bob Melvin, I think, is a great hire for exactly that reason. And I think those are the types of guys that win World Series, almost regardless of what the makeup of the team is, in terms of homegrown versus free agents, as long as those guys get to have a hand in building that roster, because they have the intuition. They throw analytics to the side, which was the one part of what Brian Cashman said that I actually cheered for, because I'm not.
Wow, we're gonna get spicy on today's episode. Yeah. I'm gonna go downstairs. You guys let me know when it's over.
But the non-analytics side of baseball, coupled, all the big free agents coupled with a guy who knows how to manage. It's why Bruce Bochy won a World Series this year. It's why Dusty Baker has been in the conversation for lots of years, been in a few opportunities to win a championship, and then finally won one last year, because they know how to manage. And I think that can, if you have the right guy at the head of the ship, you can start to push some of that other noise away, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into this analytics, not analytics thing here in a minute, because we have two very different viewpoints on the show, and I'm Mr. in the middle. But Brian, we've talked about on our show, and you pointed out on your Substack a couple of times that after 2024 for the Astros, there's a big cliff, and there are choices with getting Altuve, Bregman. Although, Jess, I do want you to tell your Bregman story before we get into the analytics fight. Bregman and Tucker. I mean, but that's going to be what the Astros have to do, because the farm system, despite the onesie twosies that we talk about, isn't a strength.
Yeah, and again, it's and so that creates an issue this offseason. Do you go? They're basically all in for 2024, the Astros. Yeah. So it creates the issue of do you go over the tax a lot, which they're probably going to do at least a little. Do you get an extra, do you get a couple bullpen pieces? Do you pick up Cal Quantrill, who just got released, because he could be good, he could be depth in your starting rotation. He could surprise, and it's $7 million. So that's, that's not nothing, but compared to a free agent pitcher, and that's an issue of, the owners, hey, baseball's a really good investment. And it's been a really good investment for a long time. Hey, there was a story today. The Yankees, get the exact number here. The New York Yankees sold $279.2 million worth of tickets for 2023.
Wow.
That's not money from their television network.
Yeah. Or merch.
Yeah. Or merch or any of that. That is, butts in the seat, getting people to come. It's a large market, and that helps, right? They got, 18 million people around here to pick from, right? But the seats, I assure you, are not cheap. At Yankee Stadium, they price some people. They price a lot of those people out, in part because they get so many people in there. Similar story for Jim Crane, right? Who not only is getting really high attendance at Astros games, but also those playoff games have to be really profitable, and he keeps getting a lot of those. So it's a measure on that. The Padres are a team which, their owner Peter Seidler passed away this week. Thoughts and prayers to his family.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I was noting today, even though the Padres were not successful on the field this season, they spent a lot of money on players and had the second best attendance in baseball. Their fans really showed up because they gave them a really exciting product with really, good players. And even though it tailed off at the end, it gave them something to sort of believe in. So, there are different ways to do this. And then there are others who, I assume John Fisher is going to make more money moving to Las Vegas. I am actually skeptical of that from the stuff that I read. But
yeah,
I don't know that
he's going to make more money by moving to Las Vegas. He's not going to spend it.
Well,
have to, right?
And that's the frustrating thing too, because we've seen, like, in many ways, it's the direct correlation where if you spend money in baseball, you make money. And you can draw a straight line to that. And, we had done a couple of episodes ago, we said our thoughts and prayers to Angels fans, because, man, that team sure does try every year, and they fall. And the same thing for the Padres. You cannot say that these guys don't roll out there, push their chips in, and it just never seems to work out for those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's also part of why the Padres have never won a World Series. They're the only game in town. You get a sense of why they want to push a little bit more in, that they're trying to win over that market, win over those people in a way that no one else, that I guess it's them or whatever women's soccer franchise is there right now. There's not a lot. So,
and San Diego State football is down in a brand new stadium. So yeah, it is the Padres. It's a baseball resurgence, back to the heyday of that one year. That they went
the 1 year, which was 1998, and I happened to stumble into Petco Park on the 30th anniversary of them beating the Astros. So between every game, I had to and I had a great time. That ballpark is top notch.
Yeah,
and I threw that bobblehead they gave me right. It was like Trevor Hoffman right in the trash. Like, I was not carrying that.
Yes, as you know, to the Astros fans have not forgotten what year that was.
Yeah,
we're still in many ways not over it.
Yeah, that's going to define us as a fan base. What didn't happen versus what has.
Yeah, the other thing I'm not over is 1986, and the reason I truly know this is the first time I went to Shea Stadium in 2007 when I moved here. I walk out of the concourse and into the stadium, and I got seats on the first base side, and I look over the right field foul pole, and I go like, "That's the one that blankety blank Lenny Dykstra hit."
Yeah.
Now, my companion on that trip was the woman I ended up marrying, so I was able to control myself and my emotions well enough not to blow that. So
I wonder if Aaron would still be with you if you just melted down like in a complete
we weren't even dating yet. This was just this baseball person, the other baseball person there's another baseball person in my office here, and then if you'd like to do this, and by the third inning, I definitely wanted to ask her out on a real date, so that works.
That worked out for you. So, Jess, I know that you've told this story a million times on every different iteration of shows, but I'm going to set the scene. Okay, Jess Canaster is an intern for the Quad City River Bandits and is instructed to go pick up a new baseball player to bring him to the ballpark. Go.
So I knew who I was picking up. I knew I was picking up the guy who was a number 2 pick in the draft that year in 2015, because that was a string of years that the Astros had top draft picks. The year before that was Carlos Correa. The year before that was Mark Appel as the number 1 picks. Both were in Quad Cities. So I'm on my way to the airport, and I get there, and by that point I had picked up a few guys who were Astros call-ups. The River Bandits at the time were low A, but this is in the olden days of minor league football, pre-reorganization, when low A was not the lowest level of affiliated baseball. It was at least 3 levels above. So there were guys who would come up from extended spring training and whatnot. I knew to look for guys who had Astros duffel bags, because the River Bandits at the time were still an Astros affiliate. Again, pre-reorganization. And so I get there, and I don't know what any of these guys look like, but I look for the Astros bag. So I see who I assume is Alex Bregman, because he's at the airport and I'm supposed to get Alex Bregman. I get him, and I help load his bags into the car, and very, very nice guy. The first thing he says to me is, "I screwed up." Okay. I just put a lip in, and I don't have a bottle. I had to throw it away before I got on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And so I endeared myself to him at the very start of the trip by procuring a bottle from my back seat, because I was an intern in minor league baseball, without any opportunity or time to clean my car. Because he had an opportunity, he had the ability to then use that bottle. But we talked for the 15-minute drive back, and I was thinking a little bit at the time, here's a guy, he's number 2 pick in the draft. He proceeds to tell me that he's been on the road for 3.5 weeks. He had come from, they had left Baton Rouge because he was still playing with LSU deep into the college baseball playoffs.
Go Tigers.
He goes to wherever their regional was, or their super regional, which was not in Baton Rouge that year. He goes from there straight to Omaha to get ready for the College World Series. He leaves Omaha in the middle of the College World Series to go get drafted in New York, goes back to Omaha to continue playing in the College World Series, and then goes to Houston to sign his contract, do BP in front of the cameras, and then from Houston flies to Moline, Illinois, where the airport in the Quad Cities is, and then he's in my car. So we're driving, and he tells me, I got a $6 million signing bonus. Like, wow, this is an important guy, and they're entrusting him to an intern. God forbid, like, I blow a tire and my car flips or something like that. Like, what kind of story is that? That's insane. So we get to the ballpark, and I take him to the clubhouse because he doesn't have all of his stuff because he hasn't been home in 3 weeks, so he hasn't been able to pack up all of his things. They end up coming later, but he has a duffel bag and a small suitcase of things, and so I help him into the clubhouse, and I turn around to leave, and he grabs me by the shoulder and says, "Here you go," and he tries to tip me $20, and I said, I'm an intern. I'm not, I don't need this tip. I appreciate it, but it's unnecessary. And he said, no, through this whole process, I was taught to be humble. yeah, this is big news for me and all this money and whatnot, but I was taught to be humble. You helped me. You helped me with the bottle. You drove me here. You helped me with this, with my bags. Please let me tip you as a way to say thanks. And so I said, I'm not going to argue with the guy. I take the $20 bill, and in a different frame of mind where I wasn't sheepish, I would have had him sign the thing, which has been in my wallet since then.
He's had it since, and we tried to get Alex on the show a couple. You remember that, Brian? Tried to get him on the show
Yes.
and it just didn't work out.
But it has been in my wallet ever since. There have been occasions in which somebody else has paid with money out of my wallet, and I've had to instruct them multiple times, pull from the back pocket, not the front pocket, because it is a somewhat new 20. I need the U.S. government to change the look of the 20. I need to have them make it like electric blue or something, so that it can stand out as a retro $20 bill and will never get spent until I have it signed, and then I'll get it framed.
I absolutely love that story. I want to get into a little college football and stuff, but okay, I have to ask. I know where you stand, Brian, but just real quick, because I want Brian to respond. Why are you so anti-analytics? Brian and I are probably closer than Brian thinks on the issue. I like to play devil's advocate a lot, but what is it about it that, I mean, because you're a baseball guy, you're in the business. Like, what is it about it that just doesn't ring your bell? I
don't like how statistics have become used as a way to predict what is going to happen. And obviously, you can look at a situation and say, well, left-handed, right-handed, and all the classic matchup type things, and look at that and say, this is what I'm going to play the numbers here, and I'm going to do things this way. But I think where I really don't like it is trying to, and I feel like this discounts a lot of plays that get made, that somebody makes what seems like a really good catch, but then you say, well, range factor was really low, so it's a catch that he should have made anyway. Like, no, the dude made a really good running catch. It doesn't matter that he's super fast.
Oh, so you're, in a way, you're saying it's really got more to do with how we conceive what's happened in the game versus trying to make lineup decisions based on it, for example.
And I think at the same, I mean, in the same way, like, yeah, it's used to explain a play. A guy who, whatever has a really low WAR happens to come up in a big situation because you have to have 9 guys in the order, and you can't always pinch hit for the perceived weak link in the lineup.
Dusty Baker's aware of that. He also thinks you're not allowed to, by rule, to pinch hit for people.
And then that guy happens to come through in that situation. And unfortunately, I feel like more often than not, the story isn't that guy came through in a big situation. It's that guy who should not have come through in that situation did.
Brian, respond.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of what I'm hearing from Jess is aesthetically, this affects how I enjoy the ball game. And so I'm exceedingly sympathetic to that point, because people enjoy ball games for lots of different reasons, and there's lots of different aspects to that. And, we should embrace all of that, because there's so many different aspects to the game and what makes it great. One of the things that's appealed to me about sports in general is trying to figure out the puzzle of how to win. And so, part of what I like analytics is, I like thinking along more with the front office in the off season and trade season with the manager during the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, do people who are weak hitters come through? Absolutely. And it is wonderful and glorious when that happens. When that happens, when Machete kills a baseball.
Yeah, but I'd take Yordan up if I could every time.
We absolutely would, right? We are more likely to expect that, right? You don't, for that exact reason, right? Same thing. The Yankees would rather have Aaron Judge batting than Den Rortvedt. You can say that.
Did we lose Brian? I think we lost Brian.
Just pause for dramatic effect. There we go.
No.
Oh, goodness.
Brian, Brian, just real quick recap. We lost you for a little bit. Recap what you just finished up after I said Jordan coming up.
Yeah, just that's true for any team that has, it's here. Hey, we've got particular guys we like better. And of course, hey, good lineups, right? Why were the Braves really good this year? Because everyone on their team was one of those types of players where there was no one you said like, oh, I can't believe we've got our 9-hitter Sean Murphy. He had 25 home runs this year, or whatever it was. Like it's when you have lineups like that, it's rare. It's great. So, part of it to me is just what is it you enjoy about the game? And again, part of what I enjoy is, figuring out the strategies of how to win. I think that's generally true for me across all sports. And baseball's the one that, in particular, the numbers matter most in baseball.
Yeah. What I kind of like about, obviously there's a lot that I like about it, but one of the things I was always excited about is how the Astros were always using data differently. So they were getting, the whole joke was if the Astros want to trade for your pitcher, don't, because they clearly see something you don't. And you could honestly, Garrett Cole doesn't win the Cy Young if he doesn't go to the Astros first, because he was a middling pitcher before Houston. So I like how Houston was really involved in like spin rate and angle and stuff like that beforehand. But one little bit of statistical data that we're gonna let Brian weigh on first. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but they're considering shortening the pitch clock in Major League Baseball for the most part with the runners on base. So basically moving that from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. Brian, you think this is a change that doesn't matter, and why are we talking about it? Or do you think it will actually have an impact on the game?
I find it odd that they don't just say, hey, the pitch clock was an amazing success and we're going to keep this up at least for the next year.
Yeah.
It's odd that they're like, this was great, let's go change it some more. So that's sort of my first sort of thought here, is that why are they not just celebrating that, the pitch clock, every one of the fears we had about the pitch clock seemed to be not met, and the game was a better game because in the end, what we missed out on was guys scratching themselves or adjusting their batting gloves or doing stuff that,
I was the biggest skeptic on our show for it. And the way I appeased myself was getting to Minute Maid a little earlier and getting my full time in the ballpark. And that's how
and you hardly noticed it in the game. So I think it's not a big deal. To go from 18 to 20, I would probably just leave well enough alone. But, if this shaves a couple minutes off the game, whatever. Because to me, the issue is not how long the game is, it's the pace of the game as it's being played.
Sure.
And the pace was exceedingly improved. And I don't know that it's going to matter with the 2 seconds, but we'll see.
Well, and Jess, you'd been living with the pitch clock, for however long. As long as you've been in minor league baseball, right? It's been a thing. Do you think 2 seconds?
4 years.
Do you think 2 seconds is going to matter?
I think what it really does is it speeds the pitcher up in a moment of potential peril, because it's going to be with a runner on base and only with a runner on base, and there's just going to be less time to think and more time to just do, or more, I guess, more need to just go for it. And I don't know if that's going to manifest itself in pitchers being better prepared before they get onto the mound, how they're going to handle different situations, almost as like audibles that would exist for a quarterback, where you have multiple pre-snap reads where you're what's going to happen, where, this guy gets on base with to lead off the inning, this is how I'm going to handle it right away, type stuff. I don't think it's going to make a ton of difference to people who are just enjoying the game. I wouldn't be surprised if you see maybe slightly different pitch selection, just because I think you're going to certainly with the way the Diamondbacks played this year and showed what great success they can have by manufacturing runs. I think, and I feel like that was the ultimate goal of pitch clock in the first place. along with the other things that was done with the base paths and the only being able to check on a runner a certain number of times, was to increase the amount of action on the bases. And I think that's where you might see it a little bit more, because guys with a couple seconds less may just go with what they know.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Brian and I have made Go Go Astros really popular, basically being the Astros podcast for old men. And so we have been talking nonstop about how he missed, like, I get that the modern game is wait for home runs, but to me, that's boring. Like, it's boring. It's exciting when it happens, but I love the old school manufacturing some runs. I want to transition to some football stuff. And Brian, we'll go with you first. I am of the opinion that this Jim Harbaugh story is much ado about nothing. I don't understand what the big deal is, because it seems like there's a million different ways to steal signs. And I understand that stealing signs in football has a much greater and immediate impact than it does in baseball. Like, I get that 100%. Where do you sit on all of this? Because, I mean, you're obviously an avid college football fan watcher. But it's just interesting that they could already be vacating a national championship they haven't won yet.
I mean, so one is, I just appreciate how funny this whole story has been, how very sort of college football it has been. And part of that, right, is sometimes there are these scandals which are like, oh, somebody did something actually terrible in real life. Sometimes it's, you've created, Bobby Petrino is funny. He also created massive liability for the University of Arkansas.
Right.
I mean,
and some Aggie fans want him to just get elevated to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is, whether you think it's truly serious or not, you have your position or the position that it's really sort of serious. You can appreciate how much that you can just be all on in this scandal, because, and then there's the, recruiting cheating scandals, which are somewhat, is this a big deal? And somewhat of like, so you were giving money to the people who are actually entertaining people who pay for it.
Yeah, right.
This is all just, just lots of funny stuff, and you can be completely all in on the funny stuff here, because there's no, there are very few larger consequences you have to worry about. You don't have to feel bad about making fun of any of these people, or, part of that, no matter sort of what you think.
It's funny you say that, because I watched an interview with Ron Livingstone, and he really regrets making fun of Michael Bolton in Office Space, because he's apparently super nice guy, and like, it's the one joke. I also love, Brian, too, that now Michigan's complaining that other teams got their signals and have been colluding to figure them. I mean, it's so weird. Jess, I don't know how much college football you watch, but you have to. I mean, what is your take on all this?
I think, immediately it's a lot similar to how I feel about sign stealing in baseball, because that's been at the forefront recently.
Has it?
That's what I've been told.
Yeah, you've heard.
I've heard a thing or two. Say what you will about what it does for like player safety. If a team defensively knows that something is coming, that somebody could be at risk for getting hurt. Then the counter is, it's football. People always get hurt. But I think that's a very legitimate thing. But everybody does it. Everybody steals signs. Not everybody gets caught, and not everybody gets caught in such hilarious fashion. And in the era that we live in, with everybody having the ability to record everything at the drop of a hat, there's nothing to say that you would even need to work for a team, be a staffer for a team, to just pull your phone out of your pocket. You're sitting on the sideline behind your team. That's where a lot of student sections are. And you have a 10 times, 20 times zoom on your phone, and you're just keyed on the guys with the giant signs with all those weird faces on them on the opposite sideline. And that's what you're doing. And then you happen to send a text or an email to headcoach@university.com. And then they have that information. So I think, it's something that everybody can do. I don't know how you prevent it. I think you have to try if you're the NCAA, but I think that it's a whole different show and a whole another 7 hours to talk about the ways in which the NCAA thinks they're trying to do things, or pretends that they're doing things that are completely opposite of what they're actually going to do.
I do think the one thing that surprised me is that they are going after Michigan, because in baseball, Michigan would be equal to the Yankees or someone, and they wouldn't go after them at all. Like, I do think that part of it's interesting. I do think that the assistant coach bawling on the sidelines was a little much for me. I don't know if you guys have a thought on that at all, Brian. If I was like, really?
It was part of the comedy.
Oh, God.
The president of Michigan put out a statement about how he'd heard from many people in the community about, who were trying to be supportive in this trying time. And let me say to the Michigan community, may his or her, whoever it is, memory be a blessing. Apparently someone died, I guess. I don't, And that's what the president's worried about at Michigan. It's I was in the difference in so the sign stealing from TV copy and from looking over at your opponents from the other side of the stadium and the 1,600 shadow staff people they now have at every one of these big programs.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. This is different because they were actually someone was going to other games.
Right.
There's a rule in the NCAA: you can't go to other games and do scouting there. It's all from film. It's a very sort of clear line that's apparently been broken. I do question how much of an advantage it is, and that's mostly from the experience of another excellent Twitter follow, Tony Adams, Astros fan.
Oh, yeah.
Recorded every single trash can bang, and people have done studies on that. It turns out the advantage the Astros got from sign stealing was modest to non-existent based on these
There are some
these things
arguments
here,
that
right?
are
It's something that's like,
negative
it's something that's colored. I read this book this summer on the New York Giants in '51 did this. We're stealing signs from their clubhouses out in center field in the Polo Grounds, and they had a guy who had been in World War II, had done long-range reconnaissance for the Navy, brought his telescope back.
And he had a lantern.
What's that?
And he had a lantern.
Yeah. And
Oh,
he like goes through the history of the electrician who's the guy who hooked it up, who's a Dodgers fan, by the way. He's talking about like all the advantage they get, and I keep reading this going like, but was it? Because I know that it was. I have better data. You wrote this book, and you wrote this book 15 years ago. I get better data than you now that indicates maybe it's not that big a deal. So it's obviously different in football.
Yeah. And I think it's football because if you're a defense, like you said, like you were alluding to, Justin, a running play is coming. Yeah. I will just put everybody on the other side where the running play is going to. I wanted to get you guys, y'all's take. And again, Jess, I don't know how deep into this you get. Brian, you might have more to say on it. One of the big things has been, and I'm going to ask you about my Longhorns. Oh, Longhorns won't be ready for the SEC. And Brian, what chance do you give the Longhorns of actually making the playoffs and winning a playoff game? And do you think they are set up in a direction where they will be competitive in the SEC?
All right. Well, first thing I will note here, as a fan of a team who could not win in Bryant-Denny Stadium this year, that Texas has won in Bryant-Denny Stadium this year, and that's one of the ultimate tests of are you ready for the SEC?
Right.
Bama's gotten a lot better over the course of the season, but it's still Bama. They still recruit like crazy, and that's sort of part of that. It sets up the most interesting question for Texas. So Texas and Alabama are real close in the rankings in the playoff committee rankings, and it's set up sort of they're both going to end up with if they both end up with one loss. Obviously, Texas has to win the Big 12.
Yeah,
I think it would be helpful if Oklahoma is the team that they beat in the Big 12 title game.
Helpful for my psyche.
Yeah, rather than somebody else. So Oklahoma State losing this week was probably good for them in that sense, because it's the most impressive win they can have within that. Obviously, they need some help sort of otherwise, because there's essentially 4 spots ahead of them, which teams went out. They'll get that, but they are. Hey, this is the best Longhorn season since 2009, right?
2009, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this is. Are they set up to go in the SEC? Are they set up to go in the SEC? Obviously, the best teams in the SEC, Alabama and Georgia, have this consistent level of recruiting, coaching, and talent development that puts them, where, oh my God, they lost. This is a famous victory for the team that defeated defeated them. You expect this. Rarely it happens, but it's always sort of a big deal. The SEC has some teams which hop up and have everything came together for LSU in 2019.
Right.
If we're doing things I'm grateful for in sports, is I got to watch the 2019 LSU team, and just everything I ever wanted to watch in a football team happened that season. And similar, Auburn's had years like that, And so the question for Texas is, hey, when Mack Brown had it rolling back in the aughts, they were kind of like, right? They lose a game most every year except the Vince Young year, but it's still a big deal when they lost.
Yeah, and in the 2009, they only lost to Alabama in the national championship game. And that was a year where I think they set some kind of record where they were the first team to have 10 wins in 10 straight years or something.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because they were always, and of course, one of the things is that Mack Brown was recruiting at a Saban level before Saban was.
Yeah.
And I say that as an LSU fan because I know how well Nick Saban was recruiting in the year.
Right.
Mack was recruiting better than them, and then also as an LSU fan, know how much better Nick got as Alabama coach than he was the LSU coach. Not that I'm bitter about that. I just have noticed that a lot.
Did you know he was going to turn into your therapy session tonight? We're lay down, Brian.
I'll hate the Miami Dolphins forever, but really it was inevitable he's going to the NFL and try.
The Dolphins also killed Ricky Williams, so I hate them too.
There's lots of lots of things here. I hope Jess understands any part of this conversation.
Well, as a college football fan of a team who once played a game and had a lead in Bryant-Denny Stadium before 56 consecutive points got hung on them, I can relate completely.
Well, Brian, I mean, Jess, like you and I can get conspiratorial. How much, Brian talked about this log jam. How much of it being a national brand like Texas being good for the sport could put them over other teams that have an equal resume?
For a year like this, I think it's such a crapshoot because you look at, especially with the college football playoff being at 4 teams, you look at the names that people who either are moderate college football fans or potentially anything less than that will recognize. They're going to recognize Georgia. They're going to recognize Alabama. They're probably going to recognize LSU. They're going to recognize Texas because in the last 25, 30 years, those schools have had relevant football teams. USC along the same wavelength. Oregon has had years where they pop up. Everybody in the Big Ten just kind of gets laughed at because it seems like every year there's a Big Ten team besides Ohio State in the conversation. They always just fail to show up to whatever game they get to play in. And then it's, well, does there even really need to be a Big Ten team besides Ohio State in the conversation? Because it's only been Ohio State who has really shown themselves year after year. The Pac-12 is its own thing.
Not for long.
And soon to be no more. And of course, this is one of the best years of Pac-12 football, or one of the most relevant years of Pac-12 football in a long time. But I think from a standpoint of this year, it's going to be really hard to predict coming down to it because, the last year of 4 teams and it really being the last time probably you'll see a who you play in what situation making the big difference. To Brian's point of Texas needing it to be Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game so that you can just kind of almost usurp their resume by beating them sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to your question of their success level of the SEC. I think losing a whole Power 5 conference, even though it hasn't factored in a whole lot in the national conversation year after year, is going to create a situation where being outside of the big names might almost be to your advantage because there's going to be such heavy hitters year after year.
Yeah. I think because I think we're looking at a massive realignment of the top 34, 30, 60, whatever team as it is, saying we are now our own thing. We are not playing football for the NCAA. I have a last question for both of you before we get out of here, and it's not on the agenda, but my brother-in-law, who some of you, if you guys are able to make it to Corpus this year, you guys will get to meet, but real insightful. And we've been talking about where college football is going, and it's going to be the kind of thing where we're all excited to get there until when we get there, we realize the thing we love isn't the same anymore. And I was thinking about that in the context of both Jimbo Fisher and Chip Kelly getting fired so early, obviously because of the early signing period, that kind of thing. Brian, we'll start with you. Is that good for the sport to see these guys getting fired mid-season like this?
I mean, this is actually, they took longer to fire somebody this year for football performance reasons. I guess Mel Tucker had performance reasons, but a different type. I'm a college professor, and I know I'd get fired for that, and I got tenure, so
Wow. I'd like St. Michael's to fire me and give me $70 million to go away, but whatever.
No, you do. So it's sort of later. Is it good for the sport? I mean, it would be. I think having the signing day in December does not serve much of anybody's interest.
Yeah. Okay.
It would be better to have the signing day in the summer. And so if you're ready and committed and want to go, you can sign it and just focus on your senior season in high school and do that. But yeah, there have been a lot of sort of perverse incentives created because, again, most of the top players sign. I understand most coaches think if you don't sign in December, that tells me you're uncommitted, even if you're committed.
Yeah, like our schools, and A&M included, pretty much have their signing class done in December. You might get a couple of 3 stars to round things out.
Yeah. There's a handful of people like that. And so, I think it's too many people. I mean, basically it becomes the signing day. It's a lot less fun than the February signing day.
I loved February signing day so much.
Yeah. And part of it was, he's like, okay, the season ended. You've got this now, a handful of weeks of, oh my goodness, this guy's on campus. I'm getting tweets from our I'm seeing tweets from our players about how good a time he's having at,
Yeah.
X,
the idea that Baxes would come in. Well, I used to put National Signing Day up there with baseball trade deadline as my sort of favorite non-on the field parts of sports.
Yeah. There was a LSU blogger who said, said, just tweet me for what I'm drinking on National Signing Day. So I got up in the morning. I got on my train at 7:30 and, hey, what are you drinking? He's like, dude, it's 6:30 in the morning. He's like, but it's your day, right? It's like, okay, hold on. That's my first beer. So
what do you think, Jess? I mean, do you think there's lots of things that have happened in the way the transfer portal run, but do you think all of these changes are good for the game? Or do you think Nathan's hypothesis of it becoming unrecognizable to what we like is true?
I mean, I think I would suggest that both of those things could be true at the same time, that there can be not evolution because evolution is necessary, but there can be evolution because there just is more wiggle room to not necessarily advance, but just to change. I think there, from the standpoint of a not Power 5 football school, a football school that I guess you don't really call it a football school because of the prowess of the team, although a big win over Fresno State. We're a football school now. And it's just a matter of, it kind of evening the playing field a little bit. It gives opportunities for more schools, lesser schools, more group of 5 schools to have their day, to have their opportunities. You can tout your December signings for February. You can use those. You can use your big recruits who have signed. You can bring them to your bowl games. You can show them off. And when they have signed, that may get somebody else over the line who doesn't sign immediately. I don't think it necessarily ruins it. I do think from a standpoint of coaches getting fired, big time coaches getting fired, that serves as a reminder, and it's almost refreshing because they're royalty, and they can still they are mortal. No different than The New
The
England.
French. So you're comparing this to the French Revolution. Off with their head.
Let them
That's
meet.
what happened at College Station this week, right?
Oh man.
But it's no different than like at the NFL level, seeing Bill Belichick talked about as somebody who might not make it through the season. Like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
And so it's unrecognizable, the idea that a guy like that his time may be up. Those guys at the college level, their time may be up. But at the same time, I think it allows, we're about to go to a world where 12 teams are going to enter with a chance to win a national championship. And it's going to be a brand new frontier. And I think you're going to see more upsets. You're going to see more unforeseen things. And in some ways, all of that I think is good for the game, because it allows for it almost feels like it's going to be counterintuitive to the consolidation of football powers into the 4 conferences that still exist, because you're going to have so much infighting there that somebody else is just going to have a really good season, and it's going to be really hard for them to not get a 9 or a 10 or 11 or 12, and then 2 wins, and here we go. Mountain West school is in the national championship game.
Well, I tell you what, and we do have to wrap up, but one of the things that I'm refreshed by you saying that, because like obviously Texas is a have and LSU is a have. So whatever we look at it, but I'm glad that you feel confident as somebody that's a group of 5 school fan that there's still going to be a place for you. Because I was really worried about the bowl season getting devalued altogether. I don't think that's happened. So guys, this was fun. Will y'all come back?
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you and I are going to be back on the 27th for Go Astros. We'll get all 3 of us together to finally break down Joe Espada. I'm going to be back with Lone Star Yell Fight, which we got to get you on, Brian, for Texas A&M LSU week. We'll work on that.
Absolutely.
Jess, do we know what front office you're going to be a part of next year? Have you any of that? Is there any news you can break for that?
Well, it's National Signing Day here, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, we can. Yeah. Do we have? Oh, we have gear.
No
hat.
No news on that. Currently with a 3.5 week old at home, learning how to be a parent.
Well, that's the most important.
Indeed.
The most important job.
I
Well,
will say I have probably 5 or 6 times related my time in minor league baseball to why I think it prepares me to be a parent, because I wake up each day not knowing what fire I'm going to have to put out. And thankfully, with only a 3.5 week old, they're all figurative.
That's
Yeah, Jess is, I think I can tell you as a father of an 11-year-old, and James can tell you as a father of an adult, that's constant. I'm still putting out fires every day. Don't know which one. James, I assume it's something similar for you.
it's something similar. The only benefit for our fires is that they're long way away, and Jessica and I can collaborate via text before we figure out how to send fire out. This has not been a fire. This has been From the Peanut Gallery. Thank you to Jess and Brian for jumping on. Hopefully we'll have our regular guys back next week, but I hope we see more of you two. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, guys.